And like the superintendent, I hope I don't offend anyone. I'm probably going to offend a lot of people, but I hope I don't. The couple of things. Number one is that the results-based budgeting, the concept of giving schools an allocation of money, and then for school leaders to figure out within the conditions that they have in their schools and their neighborhoods, to figure out how best to educate those and support those young people, yes, it is something that got implemented under Dr. Randy Ward in state administration in this first year of state administration. But that concept was something that the superintendent had helped to develop way back when this board, prior to us, adopted a site-based decision-making policy. Subsequent after that, there was a small schools policy that reinforced that. And prior to state takeover, months before state takeover, the board introduced legislation to create something called school-based budgeting. This value of empowering schools to do things, not to do whatever they want to do, not like a whole bunch of nonprofit organizations doing their own thing, but to be able to do it in the context of how we need to move as a city, and then being able to break it down into your local school community and give schools the conditions, the power, and the resources to make things happen is a value, a guiding principle that has been here in Oakland schools and school politics and school district politics for over 2 decades. Okay? And what this policy that we just passed reinforces that again, because since it was under state administration, as our former colleague, Director Alice Spearman says, this board has no policy on results-based budgeting. And that's true, and we couldn't do anything about it because we had no power. And so it's come fast forward now 4 years into the 5th year of local governance that we're in fact doing this. Now, to be completely real, right, if we were in a bar, or maybe not in a bar, we were in somebody's living room, to be real, is that there are powerful forces in the city and in the state that don't like that. Okay? Because centralized power, this group here, union leadership, and state charter association, love centralized power. Because that's where the game is at and deals can get cut there. But to be responsive and be in right relationship to rank and file teachers, rank and file custodians, rank and file parents and young people and neighbors, that's too hard. That's too hard for people who make 6 digits. That's too hard for politicians. That's too hard for union bureaucrats to do. And what our policy is about is turning that stuff on its head. But within the context, it's true that you do come to these agreements. Collective bargaining, these are all good things. But it is within a context that in a large public institution, that stuff does not work well. And our greatest proof of that is that over 30% of our young people are in charter schools in this district and growing. And so we don't want to go from one extreme to another extreme. I think this policy is trying to get us somewhere in the middle, and that these, what I would consider to be urban myths, that we say that market forces really inspire and motivate educators and administrators to make decisions, I think is a bunch of crap. Okay? Schools have not been motivated when we say, because Dr. Ward says we're going to do it based on attendance, so we motivate schools to do something about attendance. Hey, I work in a lot of schools. No one's caring about attendance, I'm sorry to say. Okay? And flip side of it, I want the concrete evidence that in the context of collective bargaining, we have so many principals and district administrators that have been able to move out veteran teachers out of the school and out of the school district only because of their seniority and they cost too much. Okay? That, frankly, is not real. Now, maybe people talk mess, and you know what I mean. Talk, you know what I mean? That stuff happens for sure. I've heard it. But the collective bargaining agreement provides tremendous protection against those kinds of abuses. Okay? So Dr. Ward thought, and many other people in this district thought, average salaries and, actual salaries is an equity thing. And what we've learned, and from what the data has been presented, both from externally and internally, is that you can't make that correlation. Okay? So there have been schools in tough neighborhoods that have benefited from actual salaries, and those have not benefited. But you know what? Both schools are in tough situations. Okay? It's not, and so so this policy has been agnostic, or actually silent, on the issue around average and actual, and a whole bunch of other things. So, but I'd say the biggest thing that I am most concerned about, I think the superintendent's proposal and staff's proposal to say we want to guarantee a core, workable, reasonable minimum standard of staffing and discretionary dollar allocations for every single school. Two things that I'm concerned about. I agree with the goal, that's what we're going to go, but I think that there are a couple of different ways for us to get there. Okay? And so two things that I'm worried about. Number one, do we in fact have enough money to do that? Okay? Because I said earlier is that we couldn't do that because of the state budget cuts. Now, I'm a heck of a lot more confident that we will be able to provide all schools that core base level funding because of the increases that are coming from the state. Okay? Whether it's average or actual, I believe that we'll be able to get there. But we need to cost that out and be clear and not make promises or lead school leaders on that you're going to get all this extra money when after we all added it up, we're short. Okay, so we got to be clear about that. But the most important thing for me is going back to that 20-plus year value and principle. Are we going to enable, just like these folks here behind me, they get to have authority over their own departmental budgets. There is no staffing formula for finance, for legal office, for the board office, for the superintendent's office. There is no minimum discretionary amount. The flexibility that we provide to our departments is an important condition for our departments to work well. I think that that's an important condition within the context of what's out here in this policy that schools have. So looking forward to the implementation, I'm looking forward to how the superintendent creatively weaves in how we are going to maintain what he has publicly stated and affirmed. And I know through his life experience and as a public official that I'm looking forward to how we creatively are able to guarantee a minimum and guarantee flexibility at the school level within the context of what this policy is. So that's my overall concern. I know the superintendent, but I want to just conclude. So then in terms of guidance, okay, what I'm looking forward to is that, like the school governance, I think the associate superintendent said, administrative regulations are going to come to us in February, that I'm looking forward that we could have administrative regulations come forward to us probably in the fall that what's going to happen right now is a, what do you call it? We're working on it. It's a work in progress. And that in February 12th, March 12th, that in those two school board meetings, the superintendent is coming back and giving us progress reports about how he is proposing how to meet these 5 guiding principles. And there's detail. It's written, this thing is written in a certain way. Okay? So the allocation and number 1 guiding principle, the allocation and expenditure of OUSD financial resources shall be aligned to the achievement of continuous improvement in school quality and student outcomes. Down here, number 1, 2, and 3 speak to exactly that. Okay? So, and you just go down the line. Okay? And I'm looking for how we are doing, how the superintendent is meeting in sort of the first phase, how he is meeting these guiding principles. I think we talked about we'll eventually have to incorporate the balanced scorecard and the LCAP process. There's this thing we talked about, scouring both our central administration and our centrally funded school services to see, to scour it and see if we're on track. What is the core base? What constitutes that in terms of staffing? And then the issue about, and it's here, it goes back to the guiding principles, but the weights, and if we're weighting something like the neighbor conditions, and I think the superintendent, shared that were several, if maybe a dozen different conditions. Are we good with that? Or are we looking for more of a narrow set of conditions? And I think that the Westlake Whole Foods thing, to me, is an excellent example. Okay? Same thing in the Havens Court area. Walmart, I think, is probably within a mile radius. Okay? And so is that, does that kind of, when we include things like that, does that, the difference between orange and red, for example. So for me personally, trauma, violence in the home, violence in the streets is it. And when I work on issues around chronic absenteeism, not on a policy, but in the real day-to-day work, when it's not parents thinking, oh, God, I forgot, I didn't take my kid, or I didn't wake up. If it's not beyond that, and it's because some other kinds of things, violence is a big deal. So that's my offering. We have two subsequent updates. The superintendent said May 30th for the budget, but I think he didn't, he forgot that in our calendar we adopted last Monday, it's actually May 14th. So it's only 2 weeks.
Even better.